Cain's wife. Where did she come from? We may never truly know where Cain's wife came from, and that's the beauty of it. Christianity is built on faith. There are mysteries God intentionally left hidden from us. We are not supposed to have all the answers, because faith means trusting God beyond human logic. Some things lie beyond our imagination, and Cain's wife is one of those mysteries. What we do know for sure is this: God provided the wife. The text tells us plainly that Cain had a wife, and that's enough to confirm that God had a plan. Today we're going to unpack this fascinating story, explore the different theories, and reflect on what it teaches us about faith, humanity, and God's bigger story. As Deuteronomy 29:29 reminds us, "The secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things revealed belong to us and to our children forever, that we may follow all the words of this law." Chapter 1. Setting the scene. To understand the mystery of Cain's wife, we first need to set the stage. In Genesis chapter 4, we see Cain, the firstborn son of Adam and Eve, consumed by jealousy toward his brother Abel. His offering to God is rejected, while Abel's is accepted, and in a fit of rage, Cain murders his brother. As a result, God curses him and banishes him from the land, sending him east of Eden into exile. But even in this punishment, God shows mercy by placing a mark on Cain to protect him from being killed by others. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, Genesis 4:17 says, "Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch." And there it is, the mystery. Where did this wife suddenly appear from? If Adam and Eve were the first humans, and their children were the first generation, how could Cain have already found a woman to marry? This one verse has sparked centuries of debate among believers, skeptics, and scholars. Chapter 2. The first humans, Adam, Eve, and their children. The Bible introduces Adam and Eve as the very first humans, directly created by God. We know about their sons Cain, Abel, and later Seth, but Genesis 5:4 gives us a crucial detail that often gets overlooked. After he begot Seth, the days of Adam were 800 years, and he had sons and daughters. This means Adam and Eve didn't just have 3 children, they had many, many more. With lifespans stretching hundreds of years, it's not difficult to imagine them producing entire generations of sons and daughters. This opens the possibility that Cain's wife may have been one of his sisters, or even a niece. From a modern perspective, this might seem disturbing, but in the earliest days of humanity, the genetic pool was fresh and uncorrupted. Marriage between close relatives would not have carried the dangers of genetic defects as it does today. In fact, this was part of God's plan to populate the earth. Later, in the Mosaic Law, God would forbid such relationships, but in these earliest generations, they were not considered sinful. Chapter 3. The sister theory. The most traditional and widely accepted explanation is that Cain married his sister. This fits neatly with Genesis 5:4, which tells us that Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters. If humanity was to grow and spread, brothers and sisters would have had to marry and bear children. Of course, today we think of this in terms of incest, which is forbidden by God's law, but in Cain's time, it was both necessary and morally acceptable. The human race was only just beginning, and the bloodlines were pure. Problems associated with close intermarriage, like genetic mutations, hadn't yet developed. Early Jewish historians like Josephus and Christian thinkers like Augustine supported this understanding. They saw it as the most logical way for humanity to spread from a single family. So, according to this theory, Cain's wife was most likely his sister, or perhaps a niece born to one of his many brothers. Chapter 4. The other humans theory. But there's another intriguing possibility that has captured the imagination of some scholars. What if Adam and Eve weren't the only humans created by God? Some suggest that while Adam and Eve were the first to receive God's breath of life and moral responsibility, there could have been other humans outside the Garden of Eden. When Cain is cursed and driven away, he expresses fear that others will kill him. But who were these others? Furthermore, the Bible tells us Cain went on to build a city. A city implies a significant population, not just a few siblings. Could it be that Cain's wife came from a different group of people already living outside Eden? This theory challenges the traditional view, but raises fascinating theological questions. Was Adam meant to be the literal father of all humanity, or was he a representative head of the human race? If Cain's wife came from such a group, it could suggest a broader, symbolic interpretation of Genesis. Chapter 5. The Jewish Perspective. Jewish tradition provides its own perspective on this mystery. In ancient rabbinic writings, particularly the Midrash, it is suggested that Cain was born with a twin sister and Abel with two. These sisters, according to Jewish interpretation, were meant to be their wives. Some sources even claim that Cain married his own twin sister. While this might sound unusual to modern ears, it shows how early Jewish interpreters understood the necessity of sibling marriages at humanity's beginning. To them, Cain's wife was not a mystery at all. She was simply one of the daughters of Adam and Eve, possibly even born alongside Cain himself. This explanation not only supports the sister theory, but also provides cultural insight into how the earliest readers of Genesis approached the story. Chapter 6. The Theological Mystery. Of course, there is also a perspective that leans into the mystery itself. Some theologians argue that the Bible doesn't specify who Cain's wife was because it doesn't need to. The point of Genesis is not to provide a step-by-step genealogical record, but to show the unfolding of God's relationship with humanity. In this view, Cain's wife is left vague because the focus of the story is not her identity, but Cain's actions and God's response. The existence of a wife for Cain simply shows that God's plan for humanity continued despite Cain's sin. The unanswered question reminds us of an important truth. We are not meant to know everything. Our faith grows when we accept the mysteries that God has chosen not to reveal. Cain's wife, then, is not a problem to be solved, but a reminder that faith sometimes requires us to walk without complete knowledge. Chapter 7. Skeptics and Criticism. Skeptics, however, often latch onto the mystery of Cain's wife as evidence against the Bible. They argue that this is a contradiction or a flaw in the narrative. If Adam and Eve were the first humans, they ask, how could Cain already have a wife? Isn't this proof that the Bible is inconsistent? But this critique misses the point. Every worldview, whether religious or scientific, has mysteries it cannot fully explain. The origin of life, the universe, or even human consciousness, all are riddled with unanswered questions. For Christians, the absence of detail about Cain's wife is not evidence of contradiction, but a call to humility. It challenges us to remember that the Bible was never meant to answer every single curiosity, but to reveal God's truth and plan for salvation. Where skeptics see a flaw, believers see faith in action. Chapter 8. What this teaches us. So what does the story of Cain's wife really teach us? More than anything, it shows God's providence. Even after Cain's terrible sin, even after he was cursed and exiled, God still allowed his life to continue. Cain's wife represents God's provision for humanity, ensuring that the human story would go on. Her presence reminds us that sin cannot cancel God's greater plan. It also teaches us humility, that we will not always have every answer, but that doesn't mean God is absent. In fact, the mysteries of Scripture often draw us closer to Him, because they remind us of how limited our human understanding is. Cain's wife challenges us to reflect on what truly matters, not her identity, but the truth that God's plan never fails. Humanity continued, nations grew, and God's story marched forward toward redemption. So in the end, Cain's wife remains a mystery. Maybe she was his sister, maybe she came from another group of humans, or maybe, just maybe, God left her identity vague to remind us that faith is not about having all the answers, but about trusting Him where knowledge ends. What we do know is this: God provided, and His plan for humanity continued. The real lesson isn't about Cain's wife at all. It's about how God's story keeps unfolding even when sin tries to stop it. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think? Was Cain's wife his sister, someone from outside Eden? Or is this one of those mysteries we may never fully solve? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's dive into the discussion. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the Bible's greatest mysteries, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share this video with someone who loves exploring the hidden stories of Scripture. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and above all, keep believing.